Committee of the Whole, Public Works, Environmental Services and Facilities for Tuesday, May the 22nd. Good evening, everyone. Call for a motion to approve the agenda. Mr. Packwood, seconder. Councillor Smale, all in favor?
Aye.
That's carried, thank you. Item 3 is the disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Are there any disclosures this evening? Councillor Smale?
I'm 7D and I live on the street, so I'm gonna sustain from that.
Okay, so for item 7D, have you submitted
I have,
the,
yeah.
the form to the clerk? Thank
Yeah.
you. Councillor Morel?
And I am going to abstain, I guess, is that the word, from 7B? The on-open road allowance adjacent to 2115 County Road 44 information item, due to the fact that the person involved is married to my wife's aunt. So by
Twice removed.
some, well.
Okay,
Yeah,
and so you've got the form,
that's good enough reason, so.
you've got the form for the
Anyway,
clerk
I've got
there.
the form right
Councillor
here,
Morel.
it's all
Okay.
filled out, and
Thank you.
tickety boo.
Any others?
You
Okay.
missed me, did you, Jay?
Okay, so we'll move on to item 4, which is business arising from previous Public Works, Environmental Services and Facilities Committee minutes. Everyone has the minutes of our April 17th meeting. Anything starting down here? Anything from you, Councillor Morel?
Just one item, business arising. Number 9, for bullet number 2, which there's talk about, I think the mayor made note that he was going to look further into the RBC situation with the bank and the possible building issue and so forth, so I just wondered if there's any update.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, so we did meet with the VP on April 18th. The CAO, myself, the VP, and the lady, I can't remember the lady's name. Branch manager. So at that point, he told us what their plan was. At that point, he indicated they would be hiring an appraisal firm to get an appraisal, and that they would be putting it on the market. They wanted it to have some market exposure. Now, I don't know how much of this I reported. Subsequent to that meeting on April the 18th, he did call me, and he told me that they did have the appraisal. I'm not gonna say the amount of the appraisal in public here tonight, but he did indicate to me that the appraisal amount that they had received from their appraiser was considerably less than the number that he used with us on the meeting of the 18th, considerably less. And that they had put it in the hands of their real estate branch, and that it would be listed, and the signs would probably be up within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Now, subsequent to that call, I've had another call from another party that's interested in purchasing it. I indicated to them exactly what I've said here. Didn't give them the appraisal amount, didn't tell them that, well, I think he told me the name of the real estate firm, but I can't just remember. I'm getting the two confused here now. 730 Truck Stop is Rogers Trainer. He didn't mention the real estate firm that would be handling the bank. So anyway, the party that called me on the weekend looking to see when it was going to be available is also extremely interested. And their type of operation, as they explained it to me, will be very compatible with the existing use and with the fact that the ATM machine will be able to remain in place. So once it's on the market, then we'll see what happens. But it sounds to me like there's going to be a fair amount of interest, because on the meeting on the 18th, the VP did indicate to us that they had already had calls and expressions of interest at even the higher level number that they had been using. So we'll see what happens when it gets on the market.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds like interest anyway. Won't be empty.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, any business arising?
Yeah, I do. I have two actually. So first of all, on page 3 of 5, so on page 3 of 5, we had talked about trying to get an extension of the pricing on North Channel Road, depending on how the pricing went on the other 2 roads. And I'm just wondering if we had any kind of a follow-through report on that.
I mean, through the chair, nothing additional to follow up at this stage. It's still open for discussion with the contractor, but awaiting final pricing on some of the other capital projects like we have in front of us tonight with Walker Street.
Okay. And then the second question is on page 4 or 5. Well, that was the shared network tower. I've made this note before I got all the way through my package, but I see the tower is dealt with on the agenda item here, so I'll just pass on that question.
And was there a third, or was that?
No, that's it.
That's it, okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor? Councillor Smith?
Nothing.
Mr. Packwood? Mr. Cameron? Okay, great. So this evening, we don't have any delegations and presentations. We don't have items listed under number 6 for discussion. Item 7 is action information items, and the first is the Spencerville Lagoon 2018 discharge report. Mr. Grant?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Spencerville Lagoon discharge went well over the 13-day period, April 9th through April 21st. I will just note that April 21st is the actual deadline window. So we did achieve that without requiring an extension. However, we're finding the March 15th, the April 21st deadline unrealistic in that first portion. We're well into April before we have the ice off the lagoon cells so that we're able to discharge. But just something to monitor.
Is there any questions or comments?
Just one question. Does the township have to monitor how much sludge is in the bottom of the lagoons?
We do, and we have had sludge depth analysis done in the past. It's been a couple years since we've had that done, but levels were trending very well with the use of an additive we were using in Shactivate, which is really leveled off that sludge depth.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Deputy Mayor?
Just on the deadline, that's part of the C of A, right, the approval?
That is-
It's written in there?
That's correct.
But it's always, we usually end up asking for, we often end up asking for an extension. So at what point does it come up for renewal, and could we request, do the weather change, request that the dates be changed to accommodate the fact that the ice is not often gone by that point in time? Or is that something you would even be concerned about?
Through the chair, we did, back when we had a couple of the emergency fall discharges, we did report to the ministry, and we had South Nation on board with respect to the quality of that effluent, and if we were able to extend that window discharge less, that we would have an improved quality product going out. However, when we approached the ministry at that time, they didn't appear to be interested in looking at adjusting that window. They felt that it coincided with spring runoff, and that was the time that they wanted discharge to occur.
But they've always been good with extensions.
They have been when requested. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor?
So my questions are more along the lines of the reporting that we get. And I'll just see if I can find a specific example here. So I'm looking at one of the reports, which I'm gonna just get you right with me if you wouldn't mind. So this is the report for, how do I read this? How do I read this? It's, it doesn't have, in page 101, but it's a final report, and it's got to do with,
Can you reference the PO? Can you reference the PO number?
The which number?
The PO number?
The report number in the top right is ending 56.
Yeah.
08056.
08056,
Yeah?
yes?
Okay, so this is a report of the sample, as I understand it. So it's the south cell, pre-discharge number 2, so it'll be the second sample. So the parameters, the BOD, and the reading of the sample is 4. What's the acceptable, the acceptable level?
Acceptable
Or
level?
what we're trying to achieve?
If I have you go back to the table, the 2018 discharge table,
You know, is that the first 2 pages, right?
The big schematic, the big.
yes, the actual table,
Yes, okay.
yes. So if you look down at the bottom of the table, we have C of A compliance.
Yes,
So for BOD, that would be 25.
okay,
For suspended solids would be 30.
yeah,
For our total phosphorus is 1, and I believe ammonia is 20.
and what's TP,
Is total phosphorus.
total phosphorus, and then the 5 is the ammonia,
And the 20 is ammonia and 5 is hydrogen sulfide.
okay? Now, so those same standards apply all the way through, right?
Correct, that is the average of the sample results are required to be under 25 for BOD
Okay.
and et cetera.
So when we sample, for example, similar report here now is I'll use this example. So it's the report that ends 09267. And it's downstream. So in other words, we're sampling the river after the discharge has gone into the river, is that correct?
Correct, so the pre-discharge samples are just of the cell themselves.
Yes.
During our discharge period, we're required to sample upstream of our discharge point and downstream of our
Right.
discharge point.
Okay, so then the total suspended solids is 3, and that's against a standard of 30,
That is correct.
and the BOD is less than 3, and that's against a standard of 25?
Correct.
Oh, so we're well within ranges, that's,
We are.
yeah.
We
I
are.
kind of thought that's what the report was telling us, but I just wanted to make it clear in my head. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Morel. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for your report. We'll move on to 7B, which is the unopened road allowance adjacent to 2115 County Road 44. CO?
Thank you, Counselor. This has been an ongoing concern of Mr. Fisher's with respect to the road allowance. Normally, a letter such as this would just become part of council correspondence, but Mr. Fisher's letter is essentially a repeat of past letters that we've received, and so I just wanted to put it on the table and just advise committee what steps staff has taken. We've certainly met with Mr. Fisher numerous times. We've tried to explain our position to him numerous times, and honestly, last fall, we had met with Mr. Fisher and 2 of his adult sons, and the Director of Operations and myself felt that we had made a very clear case to Mr. Fisher and to the 2 younger Mr. Fishers, and I was a bit surprised to get this letter, but we don't feel that there's an infraction here. There's no question that Mr. Stevenson is using the road allowance, but it's not, he's not using it as his driveway. He did install a separate driveway as requested, and he is permitted to travel on it. We've told Mr. Fisher that if he sees parking, the vehicle's parked on it, by all means, to let us know that's not permitted, but I think the only thing that would really satisfy Mr. Fisher would be potentially to close that road allowance. I'm not sure that that's, I mean, council has discussed it in the past and declined to do that, so. Anyway, long story short, staff is satisfied that we've done as much as we can with Mr. Fisher, but happy to hear any other suggestions.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
You know, and I've been dealing with it as almost as long as you have. I'm looking at his letter. Bylaw, the first page of the last paragraph, bylaw 2015-52, item 2 clearly states, on open road allowances may not be used to access single residence. What is plainer than this statement? Da 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 da. And I'm just wondering if the way to make this problem go away, because it doesn't seem to be going away, doesn't lie in the next item on the agenda. Where the next item on the agenda, we're gonna enter into a license agreement with Shared Network Canada for a use of unopened road allowance on Hands Road. And that license agreement is going to be sort of in congruence with our policy, but it's gonna formalize the arrangement under which they can use that unopened road allowance. So just through the chair, a question to staff, what if we developed a similar type of license, similar but different, where both Mr. Stevenson and Mr. Fisher signed it? And they both had the same rights to that little piece of road allowance. Because I think we all understand that Mr. Stevenson is using about 100 yards as he slips out his driveway and gets onto County Road 44. But Mr. Fisher actually is, I believe, using the road allowance to access his back 40. So in effect, they're both using it. Mr. Stevenson is using it to access his residence. Mr. Fisher's not using it for that purpose, but I think he's still using it. But maybe he isn't. He may be using the laneway that he's built beside the road allowance. So I'll just sort of throw that question out, because I know that every time we get one of these letters, we have to deal with it in some form. And it doesn't matter what the staff answer is going to be, he's going to come after the elected officials. And we're going to be, you know, he's going to be wanting to understand why we're not enforcing our bylaws, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just a question, through the chair.
Madam CEO.
Oh, certainly, we can offer a license agreement. I'm not sure how that would go if one said yes and the other said no.
Same offer to both. Same offer to both.
Well, my reading of the other one was that there is still access allowed other people on the unopened road allowance. So, I mean, the reality is that having them sign that's not changing anything. It's just making them indicate a clear understanding of what's really there. So, has it ever been blocked by the other gentleman that uses it for the?
Yeah, when Mr. Stevenson first purchased the property, he did actually, because there was no driveway, it was the only access to the house, and he did park things on it and get in Mr. Fisher's way, and that's sort of what brought it all to a head. So at that point, we did enforce the policy that requires a house to have a driveway, and Mr. Stevenson ordered and paid for one through the county to have his own private entranceway. But I don't believe that that's been the case for the past, I'm gonna say, 24 months.
Well, it sounds like a reasonable solution. What's the harm in trying?
So, what's our position as it relates to the referenced paragraph by the mayor that further in the letter from Mr. Fisher, further bylaw 2015-52 and 2 clearly states, quote, unopened road allowances may not be used to access single residences, end quote. So is that the purpose for which Mr. Stevenson is traveling the road?
No, he has his own access.
He does have his own access.
So
But he is using that for an access, is what the point that
I
he's.
think what he's doing, and I mean, I think it's, if you look at the picture that was provided on the back side of the information item, you can see that there is a bit of a circular driveway thing going on there. So I think Mr. Stevenson has created an entrance into his house, but has joined it to the road allowance and has essentially made himself a circular driveway, which for safety purposes is probably understandable.
But is it a prohibited use to access a single residence by an unopened road allowance?
If that was the only access, yes, but it's not.
Maybe we need to amend that bylaw to make sure it's, like, that
There-
just seems like he's found like a needle in the haystack, right?
Certainly, but there are a number of properties that only can access their houses by unopened road allowances that, because it was allowed to go on for years and years and years prior to this bylaw. I don't know how far you wanna go down that road.
Yeah, because I can think of at least one where
Oh, I know
we,
one too,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
So,
I
I
like
mean,
the mayor's
you know, we
suggestion.
can offer a license agreement and see what the uptake is on
I mean, I quite agree with you. I think staff has done everything you can do. I mean, and I know the use that Stevenson is making of it is not to access, he nips out that way, he doesn't use 100 yards of it. And I'm quite convinced he no longer parks on it or blocks it in any way, shape, or form. But poor Mr. Fisher he really has got this burr under his saddle.
Okay, so,
Mitch?
yeah, go ahead.
Just for clarification, I'm looking at the second overhead picture. Is this house habitable that I'm seeing there, or is this just something that's falling down?
No, and I think that photo in 2008 certainly indicated a home that was not particularly habitable. Mr. Stevenson has done a tremendous amount of work on that property, all of which raised more suspicion from his neighbors. But yes, it's become more and more up to standard as Mr. Stevenson has owned it.
Now, does Mr. Fisher, does he live across the road then?
Mhm.
And then he uses that unopened road allowance to get to his land,
Yeah.
I'm assuming, yeah?
Yeah, his land is further to the east.
Now, of
Well,
course, as we
now,
know, he'd
in
be
the-
quite happy if we sold him that road allowance. That's,
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
what this is all about.
Now, in the very first picture, you've got 2115 with a house, and then there's a house beside it.
Yeah, the 2115 is actually supposed to be on the house beside it.
Okay,
The addressing is a little off.
all right, okay, I got you now then. Okay, thank you.
Okay, were there any other questions? So, council has previous, did you have a question?
No, it's okay, I was just gonna say, can we not just make him gate at the end of that one entrance?
To what end?
Mr. Stevenson?
That crosses the road allowance? But then it's taking his right away to use the road allowance and everybody else can, correct?
Correct.
I think
So-
we just need to.
So if he only goes in backwards, is he accessing or?
Excellent, that's good, that's
Um,
really good.
If,
Just tell him to back out instead of driving out, or?
Go ahead.
if I may, if we can look at the 2014 GIS imagery.
The third picture?
The third picture. You'll see two vehicles parked there. Okay. To that extent, that is what we were attempting to alleviate by saying that those road allowances will not be used to access single residences. Not that we will forbid somebody that happens to live on a corner lot that they can't access one side of the property. So I think we're in compliance with that bylaw, with the intent of the bylaw. Unfortunately, you know, the individual is playing with that particular word. And that's, the unfortunate reality.
Okay, so is there any, thank you, Mr. Grant, is there any appetite to take an action here to recommend that council stop, oppose, and convey the road allowance, or to pursue some kind of written agreement between the two neighbors, or to simply receive the information item. Just so that we can close it off, so,
Question for staff?
yeah, go ahead.
Through you. The idea that the mayor presented, I think, is a good one, but I'm wondering, is it too late? Is it something that would just stir things up more, or should we just let it ride, or leave it to staff to determine?
It's sort of difficult to predict, but I think, in one way or the other, I'm going to have to respond to Mr. Fisher's letter, and maybe that's the thing to do, is to say, council's willing to enter into a license agreement with you for the use of it, as well as with Mr. Stevenson, if that would make you feel more comfortable about clarifying, and see what response I get.
I think that if you did that, it would serve us well, because in the last paragraph or so, he refers to the potentiality of court action. And there's no question in my mind that if we ended up in a courtroom with today's circumstances, the only thing that was in front of the court, that we would be okay. But if we went that extra step of saying, listen, we're prepared to drop a license agreement which recognizes the uniqueness of both these situations relative to the bylaw. Even if they both refused us, we would at least be able to say in front of a court, well, Your Honor, we don't think that there's any violation of the bylaw, we don't think there's anything to enforce here, but we've gone the extra step, and we've been refused. What more can we do? And then just leave ourselves in the hands of the court? I don't know whether he'll take us to court or not, because that's deep pockets, and I don't know that he wants to go that far, but he does write well, and he does express himself well.
Okay, so we have the deputy mayor taking up the mayor's idea to, for staff to pursue a written agreement between Mr. Stevenson and Mr. Fisher. Any?
Sorry, if I may, just clarify that the agreement would be between the township and Mr. Stevenson, and the township and Mr. Fisher. We won't try and get out.
Fair enough, thank you. So any opposition to that? No concern?
I don't have any opposition to it, I think it's a little, not a great use of staff time. I know you've spent a lot of time on this, and I think that it's one neighbor just harassing the other neighbor, and it's not gonna stop no matter what we do. If you think that'll help, then by all means, but, where do you draw the line on that?
Okay.
We're talking about, 100 feet of it.
Fair comments. Anything else? Okay, so we have a consensus. Does staff have sufficient direction to proceed with the two separate agreements between the township and each of the property owners? Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 7C. And that is the unopened road allowance for Shared Network Canada, and there's a recommendation here.
Moved.
The mayor moves with Councillor Smale seconding, that committee recommends that council adopt a bylaw to authorize the attached agreement for use of the unmaintained road allowance at the easterly limit of Hands Road. Any comment from staff before?
Actually, yes, if I may, Councillor, I just wanted to point out that this agreement may not get to council next week. We're still working with HFI to make sure that their concerns are addressed. We've asked Shared Network to give us some, apparently there's an issue with lightning strikes near a fireworks factory. And we've asked Shared Networks Canada to give us some assurance with respect to whether or not this is going to create a lightning strike problem that was not there before. So that's to be resolved, and I'm not gonna bring this agreement forward until we've got a very precise answer on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, through the chair, is that concern being raised by HFI?
Yes.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Will they be parking at any time on this unopened road allowance? Sorry, I'll stop. I thought that was gonna be.
Only Mr. Fisher and Mr. Stevenson.
Go ahead.
My concern is this. I don't know that Shared Network Canada has any mechanism to assure us that a lightning strike is not a possibility. And if they can't provide those assurances, where do we go from here? Do we have a backdoor route here?
If I may, my understanding is that it's not, HFI deals with lightning strikes within 10 kilometers of itself all the time. But their concern is that the presence of a tower could increase the number of lightning strikes. My research, and I'm not a scientist, but my research tells me to this point that the shorter towers, the 70-meter towers, which is what we're talking about here, do not attract additional strikes. But we've asked Shared Networks to provide us with the scientific data to address the concern.
Okay, fair. I understand where you're going.
Okay, any further question of staff or comment? Okay, moved and seconded, all in favor? All opposed? And that is carried. So move on to item 7D, and that's the Walker Street reconstruction tender, ECPW 1803, and circulated on the desk this evening is a modification to the one that was it just in the electronic package or everyone's? Everyone, okay. So, and the only difference is the highlight in the recommendation on page 2 of 2. And that's award the Walker Street reconstruction tender, ECPW 1803. So, is there a mover for the recommendation? Or do we want to do satisfy questions first? Okay, so it's moved by the deputy mayor, and is there a seconder? Yeah, Mr. Packwood, to second, okay, perfect. So, did you have a question, deputy mayor?
That's a lot of money.
No kidding.
And I'm just trying to refresh my head about how we were going to deal with that, and whether or not the whole project could get done in one summer, so I just,
Okay.
that's
Madam CEO.
Thank you. Council, yeah, if the committee would cast their mind back to last month when we talked about how to finance this, and that is repeated in this month's action item. A good chunk of the funding for this project will come from reserves, which, the reserves are there and can be used. It's maybe not the ideal way we prefer to have more reserves, but the project we talked about doing it in parts, but felt that the economies of scale were such that it was, and the disturbance to the residents as well along that street, was better to get it all done in one go. We did get pretty favorable pricing on this tender. The $1,087,000 is considerably less than what we had budgeted, so, which was $1.281 million. So we were pretty happy about that, and Cornwall Gravel is a company we've worked with before. We know that we will require some significant contract administration, which we have built into our cost estimate there, as well as a contingency. It is a lot of money, but we have another opportunity this fall to apply for OCIF funding, perhaps for the County Road 2 project, if that's what council decides. And my sense is, I don't know if this is true or not, but my sense is that if we show the powers that be that we are willing to use the reserves that we have to do the work that needs to be done, that they may then look on a grant application more favorably.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
So I'm gonna speak through the chair, if I may. I'm gonna speak a little bit at length to this. So we have a cost here of 1.087. And back in March, we were looking at a cost of $1,281,000. So in effect, this tender is coming in at $200,000 less than what we estimated. But when the treasurer reported to us back in March, she was working with a cost of $1,281,000. So just remember that there's a $200,000 margin there. And back at that point, she pointed out to us that we would be drawing $842,500 out of the reserves. But the amount that was remaining in the reserves was still, in my opinion, quite healthy. So for example, we would draw $405,000 out of the Public Works Reserve, but that would still leave a balance of $322,000 in. We would draw $90,000 out of the Cardinal Water Reserve, but that would still leave $488,000 in at the end of the year. We would draw $50,500 out of the Cardinal Wastewater Reserve, but that would still leave $311,000 in. And we would draw $297,000 out of the Industrial Parklands Reserve, and I think that concept was to borrow, but that would still leave $439,000 in that reserve. Now, I mean, I have a lot of trouble with this one, but there's no question that the work needs to be done. And I'm going to pick up on the staff comment that this shows our funders, our potential funders through the OCIF, that we're serious about doing this work and maintaining the health and safety of these systems. So I'm gonna vote in favor of this motion, and let's get it done. 5 years from today, we'll forget about the discussion. It'll be over and done and half paid for by then.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Merrill?
I concur.
Okay. Gentlemen? Okay, so the motion is, or the recommendation is moved and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor? All opposed? And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. So we move to item 7E, and that's the 2018 OCIF top-up component program launch, and there's a recommendation here. Is there a mover for the recommendation?
So moved.
Moved by the mayor. Is there a secondary? Mr. Cameron. And that's, committee recommends that council endorse the Kenny Road 2 water and sewer rehabilitation as the selected project eligible for the 2018 OCIF top-up application-based component, and direct staff to prepare and submit an application under the 2018 intake prior to the August 20th, 2018 deadline. Comments or questions for staff? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so my comment goes along these lines. We had, in the last OCIF go-round, unless I've got my facts wrong, and I'll ask the staff to correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me that in the last OCIF go-round, we did engage the services of what I would call assistant consultant, a consultant to assist us. I would like to avail ourselves of that same assistance for this application. I think having the same face represent the application and help us present the application makes a certain amount of sense. And sometimes it's hard for the funders to say no twice to the same face. And I know that assistance that we had was a kind of an in-your-face representation. So I would just like to put that forward as my reason for supporting this and looking for that type of assistance.
Okay. Is there other comment or question? Okay, so moved and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. And 7F is the site plan agreement amendment application for 9 Newport Drive, and there's a recommendation here, is there a mover? Councillor Smale, and is there a seconder? Mr. Packwood. And that's that committee recommends that council pass a bylaw to amend the existing site plan control agreement to include the updated site plan and schedules. Any questions for staff, comments from staff?
Relatively minor amendment, actually, just mostly to do with fencing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor?
My question is this. This is what I have in my package, which is 8.5 by 11.
Having trouble reading it?
I'm going to request that either the staff supply me with new glasses or a larger copy. And this was really busy, and it's pretty small. And am I correct in deducing that the major amendment to the site plan is basically the higher fence surrounding a greater amount of property and enclosing it sort of at the halfway mark down the, is that the basis of the
It
event?
is, although actually the new fencing is proposed to be a bit lower. The existing site plan control agreement called for either 12 or 14 foot fencing, this is actually gonna be 10.
So are they going to, I thought it was 8.
8 plus,
The cuts
Barbed
into
wire.
Okay, so are they actually gonna take the old fence down?
mhm,
Is that the concept? Oh, no kidding.
yeah.
So what I'd like to do, Mr. Chair, is if we can deal with this, I'd like to ask a couple of other questions that are sort of off topic, but relative to the same, not the same site plan agreement, but a different one.
So, can we deal with your question under item 8? For inquiries and
Yeah, yeah,
motion?
yeah.
Okay. So for 7F, are there any more questions?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm just confused as to what company this is.
It's a numbered company?
Yeah, but your diagram doesn't have the number company, it's got a purple farm.
Yeah, and so that will be the marijuana production facility that's going into the industrial park.
Okay. So the water and the sand that has, I know that all the proper authorities have been contacted and given their, is that the reason the water and sanitary services are worded the way it is?
It's one of the reasons, although to be honest with you, after consulting with the director of operations and the chief water sewer operator, we feel that those two clauses are probably going to become standard in site plan control agreements where municipal services are present.
Okay.
Go ahead.
But the deputy mayor raised a question. They're still going to have access to the water supply from Prescott.
That's correct.
Do we know what their projected usage will be?
It's not anticipated that it will be any different from what it was when Haycor was in full operation. The operation, as I understand it, is hydroponic, so they reuse the water. There's not a constant draw.
Okay.
It's not so much the draw, though, also the discharge, so they're putting it into a, there is no sewer,
Yeah.
so they're putting it into a septic system.
They're reusing the water as they use it for growth. They re-nutrient it.
Okay, so there's no discharge at all,
Well, there'll be some, because there's some.
but they will have a septic system.
No, it's on municipal sewer,
Okay.
municipal water. and
But are they
municipal-
separating their operations water from their, from their, so all the water they're using for their plants does not leave the building?
Doesn't get discharged.
Okay, that's the,
Oh, okay, so that's a closed circuit.
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I wanna make sure of,
Okay,
because,
I
yeah.
get you.
Okay, Councilor Morrow?
Just have maybe a question and a comment. I know this came before us in camera at the time, you know, for the purchase of the property. And I guess I was just, I don't think this was made public with Mr. Elswitty until basically tonight, I don't think. But anyway, I know we discussed things in camera, and I was flabbergasted. My way, you know, like my better half was asking what's going on up at, you know, and seeing the land cleared and stuff, and I said, oh, there's been interest in some 4 acres, you know, two people kicking tires. About 2 weeks ago, I'm in Gatineau, and something came up, and people from Johnstown, and geez, you know, they said something about, you know, I don't know how it came up, but they said, oh, the marijuana, place is coming to, and I said, what? How do you know that? Well, the people were talking about it. And I'm thinking, I learned to my wife, and I says, well, now you know what the hell's coming there now. I said, you know, we're in Cameron. I don't know how the town gossip or whomever got to know it, but I was flabbergasted. In fact, I was a little ticked off myself, but anyway, and I pointed out, I said, well, now you know what the hell's coming to Johnstown there in that area. But anyway, that's beside the point. I guess, my
Can I
point is,
speak to that though, Counselor?
I didn't know he was, like, I knew it was Mr. Elspeth, and we had it in camera.
Yeah.
And I knew that the land hadn't really gone through, but I didn't know when it was.
The in-camera portion where we were discussing Mr. Elsworthy's business was when we were selling him the property.
Yeah,
The fact of the use of the existing building as a marijuana production facility was never a secret. This is the existing building.
okay, well, I kept it a secret, so my wife didn't know. Anyway, I was, okay, sorry to the town gossip, I apologize, anyway. But I was just thinking we may have to rebrand our township, because we've got the King's Lock Distillery, we've got Windmill Brewery, and we've got this marijuana facility. So we might have to say, come to Eversburg Cardinal, or you'll never get higher. So, anyway, maybe our new brand. Anyway, just a food for thought, so.
Never get higher.
Or we're always high in Eversburg Cardinal, maybe.
And when you think about it, the places are high. The highest places in the township.
Anyway, all right, I was under the impression, you know, the big announcement wasn't made, and so I just.
So, on that note, the recommendation is moved and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? And that's carried. And item 8, councillor inquiries, notice of motion, and we'll start with you, Mr. You had a
And so, I guess my question was, do we have any follow-up, or any kind of an idea when we might see a site plan agreement for the lot next door?
I can't answer that for sure. Certainly, we're in conversation with Mr. Elsworthy, but when he'll be ready to go with the new building, I'm not 100% sure. He is under some pressure because of our own conditions associated with the purchase agreement.
6 months,
I think it was, I believe it was 12 months to building permits.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
And so the second question, do we know conclusively at this point whether or not he has his licenses to proceed as per his plans?
He does not have his full license. He anticipates having it within 90 to 120 days.
That's it for my question.
Okay. Are there other councillor inquiries or notice of motion? Okay, so question from me. At our meeting in April, we raised the subject of signage for Centennial 67 Public School, and there was mention that it dovetailed with a discussion at the CDC that they were having about signage, and I know that there were some consultation happening about new signage for the municipality. Just wondering if we're any further along today on the subject of signage for Centennial.
Not specifically for Centennial, although the mayor did go out and speak with and get some price estimates for a potential sign associated with the SBCC sign out on the corner there. My thought was to approach the principal at Centennial 67 and see if she had any interest in participating in something like that. It would be relatively low cost. The Community Development Committee did talk about the signage project as an overarching thing, and certainly all of our policy documents indicate that, and vice reports indicate that we need better directional signage that will point out not just municipal facilities, but things like schools. So I believe the direction from CDC was that the staff was to go and get an inventory and start preparing some cost estimates and bring back some designs, potential designs for signage for a sort of overarching program that would include signage towards the schools, but not, that wasn't a specific thing that was addressed within that project, but it is part of it. I haven't done anything about speaking with the principal, but it is on my desk.
So, so thank you very much. Is there the potential for, some level of signage to be erected in the next, 30, 60, 90 days, be it on the post, pointing to the school, or, if not as, large as the project with the SBCC sign, or?
I honestly believe that the SBCC sign idea will be more likely to go forward in 30 to 60 days than the overarching, because the committee still has to select the design, signs have to be ordered, locates, all
Okay.
of that kind of stuff has to still be done.
Gotcha.
Okay, so, the SBCC meeting was this morning, and, I sort of try to keep track of what they're doing. They've re-erected a new sign, and
Looks great.
and it looks good, and they've installed a tracking system, so now that all the signs must be the same size, 18 inches by 36 inches, 1/4 inch coroplast, and it slides into the slot. The concept that I had prepared by Kathy Cleary was, I asked her to design something that was about that was exactly that size. Because SBCC's previous meeting was in April, today's meeting was the follow-up meeting in May. So Kathy gave me the concept for 18 by 36 inches. The concept is that the owner purchases the sign and then makes arrangement with the representative of SBCC to slide it into the tracking system. $25 a month for the first month or 2 months or 3 months, I can't remember, depending on if there's a lot of demand for the 9 spaces, then you have to keep paying, but if there's no demand, they might let you stay a little bit longer. So my idea is, the CAO is gonna approach the principal, give the principal an opportunity to say yes or no. If she hasn't got $25 to put that sign up for a month or 2 months, or maybe 3 to get us over the summer, then maybe we can find a spot in our budget for $75 and get that. Well, $75 plus production, because we have to get it produced at, probably Gordon Science produce it in a couple of days. But, I mean, I quite agree with you, I think we should get something up there. The project that the SBCC is working on, I agree with the CAO, it's probably gonna take a little bit of while until we see some actual tangible signs on it.
So, so for $300 a year, that's not a tremendous sum of money, provided the space is there. But I mean, if they have interest, I can't picture 9 local businesses occupying all the spots all of the time, but it would be a little disappointing if they got bumped, like if it ended up being part of a rotation instead of a fixture. And so I guess if we ended up in that place, then we could look at the design concept and then putting it on something more permanent, and then perhaps attaching it to the municipal sign on the east side of County Road 21.
There will be school signage as part of the overall project.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
And honestly, as I mentioned to the mayor, if the school needs a sign, then the school needs to have a sign. We'll help them, we'll expedite it, and I know it's not much money, but boy, if we pay for the schools, then it's not gonna be long before the Legion's gonna be looking for one in the mill and the art scene and you wanna,
You
wanna
open a
just
can of
be
worms.
careful, you do open a big can of worms for an entity that has its own budget.
Yes.
And I appreciate that, and I'm sensitive to that. But as I said at our meeting last month, the catalyst here is, when we were at the 11th hour and looking at what could we do for Benson, the question was what could we have done for Benson, and would $300 a year have saved that school? Probably not, but that's kind of the stepping off point where it came from. But for sure, so that's great that the CDC will move ahead, and if we're able to strike up a partnership with the school to get this off the ground for this year, that would be fantastic. Anything else under item 8? No. Item 9, the mayor's report.
Okay, so 2 items. First, we have in our package, in one of our correspondence packages, this notice from Trans Northern Pipeline that they'll be doing an integrity dig at, the way I read the map, it's someplace in the neighborhood of Cedar Grove Road, where the old railroad crosses Cedar Grove Road. Anyway, I just point that out because there will be a fair amount of work going on there. The last thing I just want to mention is that the school board has announced their annual meeting with the communities to review their pupil accommodation review. Will take place on June the 8th, I think it was. Yeah, June the 8th in Kempville. And the government of Ontario has released the new guidelines, and there's quite a significant change because the government envisages that these will now be conversations, in other words, two-way discussions. All of the previous 3 that we went to were not discussions. The school board stood up and said, here's how many kids we've got in this school, here's how many vacant spaces there are, and they went school by school to show us where the vacant spaces were, and then they said, we're closing this one, and this one, and this one in this year, and that one, and that one, and that one the next year. And that was the end of discussion. There was no discussion. So the government clearly envisages that this meeting on June the 8th will be the start of a discussion of the next round. And so I'm just putting that out there because I'm going to be talking to Mayor Malanka on Thursday. I'd like him to make sure he makes a presence there. And if there's any other members of council, I think, you know, the more of us that show up at these meetings and begin the consultation phase, the discussion phase, and start digging in our heels a little bit, I think the sooner we send the message to the school boards that that's the end of rural school closures. It's really unfortunate that Benson lost. I mean, we put up a good fight. I think we could not have done more, but let's make sure that we don't lose another school is my sort of philosophy at this point. And I know that that's going to be very hard to change because in spite of the fact that the government is telling the school boards that there has to be greater consultation and greater working with the communities before these small schools are closed, this particular school board clearly has an agenda. And their agenda is to close any school that's less than a couple of hundred kids and try to bulk these kids together into groups of 600 and build bigger schools. That's clearly their agenda. So I'm just putting that out there, and that's the extent of my report.
Okay, thank you very much. And what was the date?
June the 8th.
June 8th.
June 8, 10 till 12 at the North Grenville Municipal Complex.
Thank you. So,
Can I just follow up, may I have a follow-up to the mayor's report?
Sure, if you have a question for the mayor.
Just a comment. One of the things that we've got to look at is not only just our elementary schools in our area, but we've got a major high school. And last year, when they gave us the reports and the surplus spaces, following all things, where they were planning to close Seaway District High School, and it didn't happen. Right now, they were going to move half of them to South Grenville and half of them to North Dundas. I remember the key point was last year in their presentation. South Grenville had 600 surplus spaces going into this year, 600. Seaway has around 300, and North Dundas has 303. So there's 1,200 spaces in those 3 high schools surplus. Nobody using them, being, okay, all the costs associated with them. So you basically got 1,200 spaces, which is one high school. In South Grenville at one time was 1,500 kids that we went there when it was originally built. So what are we doing? How are we going to prepare? They want hubs. What are we going to put in there that's going to pay, for that empty space at South Grenville? It's for us to come up with some ideas. Are we going to get doctors' clinics and so forth to move there? Are we going to get early childhood? I don't know. But they said last year, be thinking of ideas to use them. And I'll tell you the other thing that hit. All boards across Canada we have a decline in enrollment. The Catholic board this year has, and it was in the Brockville paper, $1.2 million less in funding because of declining enrollment. The Upper Canada board has $1.6 million less in declining enrollment as a grant because of fewer students. 1.6 million. They were planning to close Seaway, it didn't happen. 300 surplus spaces there. They put $1.5 million into renovations in parking lots, roofing, doors, and windows to keep that school open. So with the 1.6 million, if they're getting less because of declining enrollment, and 1.5 million gone into that school to retrofit it, there's $3 million deficit, I would say. Anyway, what are we going to come up with? That's what they threw out. What are our solutions to keep those schools viable? That's what we've got to be thinking. And if we're not, it's going to happen sooner or later in 5 years, and so forth. So those are the facts. You're keeping them open, and it's costing money, and taxpayers are paying for it. And that's why we taxpayers saying, geez, the governments can't. If governments made the decision, or the politicians, there'd be a hell of a lot of less money being spent frivolously. But it's up to the politicians, or the school board, or whomever. But there's a $3 million deficit right there. And that's what.
I'm just gonna pick up on a bit of that, because it's a funny situation that's developing. I don't know what they'll say at this meeting on June the 8th, but last year they showed South Edwardsburg School as having vacant spaces. Equivalent basically to 2 empty classrooms. And we said, well, just a minute now, you've got 2 classrooms that are hosting a daycare center. I think it's a daycare center. And we said, you know, what loading do you put on those 2 classrooms that are being used as a daycare center? They said, well, we don't count them. And so when the minister was in Merrickville, I said to the minister, I don't understand this, because those 2 classrooms are being used by, now is that the private daycare centers? Yes, supported to a large extent, I think, by Leeds and by the counties.
Yeah,
Subsidized by the counties. I said, you know, the county subsidizes the use of those 2 classrooms, but the board shows them as vacant. Why has the minister not dictated to the boards that where these classrooms are being used for those kinds of purposes, that they can't show that as vacant space? She said, I'll get you an answer. Well, I'm still waiting for the answer. So I don't know what we'll hear on June the 7th, June the 8th, but I'm really looking forward to knowing what that's going to be. But, you know, to Councillor Morell's point, the other side of it is, I mean, even a school like Benson, if we had not been forced to buy that school, if that school, which was paid for by the taxpayers, reverted to the taxpayers, without the board being forced to divest of it at, what was the term they used? Fair market value. You know, perhaps something could have been done with it. But when the ministry is telling them that they have to get fair market value out of the school, I mean, you know, fair market value comes in way above anything we can afford to do with it.
So we'll just draw that to a close.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you for your report, Mr. Mayor, and for your comments, Councilor Morell. We'll move to questions from our gallery this evening. Thank you for coming. And we have no closed session, and I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Councilor Smale, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor?
Aye.
And that's carried. Thanks very much, everyone.